Welcome to the Insiders Insight podcast, where we share with you the thoughts of the individuals who are working for projects that are changing the world. Thank you to our sponsor, Creditcoin, the building blocks of trust. For more details, please visit the show notes below. Welcome to Insiders Insight presented by OffChain. Today, we are so happy to have Josh from Origin Protocol to join us, and we're going to be discussing the future of DeFi and how stablecoins are going to play their part in that future. But before we begin, Josh, why don't you give a quick introduction to yourself and a quick introduction to what you're doing at Origin?
Absolutely. And it's an honor to be here today. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm Josh Fraser, one of the co-founders of Origin Protocol. We started in the space in 2017, and we've been building ever since. Origin actually has a couple products today. One is an NFT platform. We did some record-breaking sales with Blau. We did $11.7 million. This was in February of last year, set a new record for the largest NFT sale at that time, and also the largest NFT music sale to date. And that really opened the floodgates and brought in really mainstream awareness to NFTs. Up to that point, NFTs are really a niche thing that only people in crypto knew about. But after that, every celebrity, musician, artist started paying attention, and that opened the gates for us to work with people like Paris Hilton. We worked with a bunch of DJs like Bassjackers, Kashmir, Don Diablo. People in the space have been working, like Trevor Jones. We worked with big companies like SpaceX. We did their launch, the Inspiration 4 launch. We did an NFT drop on that. And the Charlie Bit Me video, if you remember that video, that meme, 800 million views of this kid, biting his brother's finger. Most watched non-commercial video on YouTube, and we turned it into an NFT, launched on our platform. So that's Origin story. That's one of our two products. And then the other one we have is Origin Dollar or USD, which I think we're going to be talking about today. And Origin Dollar is really the easiest way for anyone to get access to the yields that are available in DeFi. And so if you're in yield farming or you've played around with this stuff, just how painful it can be. You have to, take your stable coins, stake them in some farm. Maybe you claim some reward tokens, and you have to swap those tokens back for stable coins, restake them in a pool, you have to claim them, and you have to repeat this cycle over and over and over and over again to get that compound interest. And Origin Dollar abstracts away all of that complexity. All you have to do is buy this token. It's worth $1. It's backed 100% by other stablecoins, so you don't have to worry about it exploding on your looking like UST or anything like that. And then you just watch your balance grow as the yield is earned. And so it's really the fastest, easiest way for anyone to participate in DeFi, and the yields are great. And so the way it does it's backed by USDC, USDT, and DAI. And as those funds come in, they're deposited into trading strategies, places like Curve or Convex, Uniswap, or lending platforms like Aave and Compound. And then as that yield is earned, it shows up automatically in your wallet as extra units of OUSD. So really excited about that, really excited about where that's going. We think it has enormous potential, as we've seen. Just explosion of stablecoins. I mean, today, more value is transferred using stablecoins every day than the Bitcoin network. So I think it really speaks to the value that stablecoins have. And certainly as we're entering this new age with, lots of inflation, people are really concerned about holding dollars in their accounts, just knowing that it's a bit of a melting ice cube. But at the same time, very, very practical. And people are using stablecoins to settle all sorts of debt. So we're excited about the role that OUSD can play in the ecosystem, and really excited about everything that's happening and all the innovations happening in this space.
Josh, just quickly, could you give more details on how the protocol decides on where it will deploy funds to raise this interest? Is it done by a DAO? Is it done by a committee? What is the operational mechanics that governs the way that that OUSD earns interest?
Yeah, great question. So partly algorithmic and partly DAO. But we went through this process of decentralizing the protocol and really handing over control to the voters in our system. So we have a governance token called OGV, or Origin Dollar Governance. And the people who vote on that can set some high level direction for the protocol on where funds should be allocated. So there's a weekly allocation when you say, hey, we want to put the funds in Convex or Aave or whichever approved strategy they want, or they can actually vote to introduce a new strategy into the mix to earn new types of yield. But then from there, the allocations are actually set by the smart contracts themselves. So it's not like Celsius or BlockFi or any of these centralized systems where you're trusting a counterparty. All of the funds are there on chain. You can see the code. You can see exactly how it's being executed. And so you don't have that same risk that you'd have with centralized systems. And so, yes, there is a bit of voting where the community are weighing in on what they view as the right risk profile. But by and large, it's actually executed by the protocol itself, as far as making sure that those wishes are carried out as new funds come in. They're dispersed according to the allocations that have been set up by the community and have been voted on.
How do you go about managing gas fees, and do you have any plans going multi-chain? Is that even feasible?
Yeah, it's a good question. Right now, the people who are buying and selling OUSD are paying their own gas costs. At some point, this was a bigger problem than it is today. Right now, it's quite cheap using the Ethereum market, just thanks to the bear market we're in today. But in general, we have tried to do a little bit of, be a little bit intelligent about how we distribute the work that's performed by the protocol. So if you want to buy $100 of OUSD, it's actually very inexpensive for you to do that. You can just, deposit 100 USDT, get 100 OUSD back, and it's very, very inexpensive for you to do that. As you increasingly do, increase the amount of money that you're trying to come in with, then we'll actually have you pay, do some of the work that's required by the protocol. So, if you come in with $1 million, we don't want that $1 million sitting idle. And so you may pay a little bit extra gas costs to actually go ahead and move those funds into, one of the yield earning strategies. Whereas someone who's coming in for a lesser amount won't be hit with that gas bill. We've spent a lot of time exploring alternate chains, and it's a really hard problem for us. And the reason is one of the core ideas of Origin Dollars, we want it to be this ubiquitous stablecoin that's just used everywhere. In our minds, if OUSD was available in all the same places that Tether is today, you'd be kind of crazy to use Tether instead of Origin Dollar, because when you're holding Tether in your wallet, you're not earning anything. But if you're holding OUSD, you're going to start earning yield on that. And so there's no downside to using Origin Dollar. Of course, the challenge there is that we're not supported in as many exchanges and applications as Tether is today. And so for a stablecoin to really be valuable, it needs to be ubiquitous. And so one of the things that we really hold dear is this idea of fungibility, that one OUSD is always equal to one OUSD. And that makes it easier for us to get it integrated into more places. There's not like Avalanche version of OUSD and a Polygon version of OUSD. There's just OUSD. There's one coin, and it's fungible. And so part of the challenge for us is figuring out how do we maintain that fungibility. We also think a lot about how we mitigate the risk. Certainly, as we've seen bridge after bridge blow up, we have some concerns about the risks of porting to different chains, and then how do we actually sandbox that risk to a certain chain so that it doesn't leak out to all of the different chains that OUSD is supported on. And again, that's a little bit at odds with our goal of keeping everything fungible. So it's something we're working on. We don't have a perfect solution yet on how we're going to approach it, but it's something we're thinking about and continuing to research.
I think that the biggest issue that is facing the crypto industry right now is probably payments. And I say this from personal experience. I have a lot of funds in crypto, and the one thing that I cannot seem to solve is how do I actually use it in the real world. There are a lot of companies that are trying to solve this issue. We've spoken to a lot of protocols. And I think that the thing that Ethereum doesn't have going for it is basically the chain isn't made to scale in its current form, right? So I was just wondering, did you guys have any ideas on how you think OUSD could start being utilized in the real world, or is that going on to the next phase, or you haven't thought about it yet?
Oh, we've certainly thought about it, and happy to share some more ideas around that. I mean, for Ethereum, I mean, they've been talking about the next version for as long as I've been in the space, for 5 years now, and the merge just happened, right? And after 5 years of delays and saying it's coming, and then it just happened sort of overnight. And it was after all these delays and all this talk, it suddenly the merge happened. I think incredible job by the Ethereum team on pulling that off. Changing the engine while the plane is in flight, so to speak. They really did a good job, and I think we're quite bullish on the next iterations and how we can introduce sharding into Ethereum and other things to help make it more scalable. I do think there is a place for tying what we're doing with OUSD into centralized finance. The dream application for me is that I can just have my paycheck deposited into an OUSD denoted account. The minute my paycheck hits my account, it's earning yield. I can send money both on-chain or off-chain. So I could send it to your Ethereum wallet, or I could send it to your username on another centralized hosted wallet, and not have to pay any gas fees. And then we could actually tie this into a debit card and the ACH system. So you can pay your rent with it. You can pay for your meals with it. And then you're finally in a situation where you have your money that's always being put to work in highest yield opportunities possible. And it's also available for you to spend when you need it. And this is not really possible today. Even with my Bank of America account, I always run into this problem where I might have the money, but it's never in the account I need it in, right? So I have a big bill come in, and I'm like, now it's not in my Bank of America account. I have to go to my trading account or sell some crypto, or have to move stuff around to get it there. And of course, with 3-day ACH transfer times in the US here, that's a massive pain point. And so I envision this future where we don't have to worry about that. It's 2022. Payments should be instant. We shouldn't have to worry about the sort of stuff. And our money should be working for us 100% of the time. We shouldn't have to be moving it back and forth between one account that is earning yield and another account that you can actually freely spend. And Origin Dollars is really a solution for that.
Yeah, I also think so that the biggest problem that crypto faces in terms of adoption is the fact that we just don't have the best possible product yet. Because you don't need to understand how internet works to use internet, right? And I hope that crypto one day can turn into the same thing, where we can just have these big applications that work extremely well, and the user interface is so easy to understand that you don't really need to dive deep into the blockchain. But on the other hand, the education issue is that if people don't know how it works, they cannot trust it. And if they cannot trust it, they cannot use it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But in terms of your project, I cannot help myself but ask, what do you think about proof of work versus proof of stake? As you mentioned that Ethereum merged. And it's also very interesting to hear your perspective, because you have your protocol that runs on Ethereum. So how did it affect your company? And could you tell us more insights about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting. First, you respond to your comments. It's interesting you think that, like, we have a long way to go on this technology, and I think that's true. But I must say, every time I have to go send a wire or deal with payments with my traditional bank account, is way more painful than sending a transaction on Ethereum. I have to wait 3 days. I have to pay wiring fees. Banking hours closed on weekends. I mean, for the most part, I feel like I'm living in the future, right? This is, it's trivial for me. I do it. I use Ethereum every single day, and it's just second nature to me. And then every time I have to go back to deal with my bank account, it feels like I'm going back in time into this. I talk to my bank, and they're like, "Please fax me this form with a wet signature." And I'm just laughing. I'm like, they're assuming I own a printer, a fax machine, and a pen. Like, I don't have any of these things. But back to your question, like, what do I think of proof of work, proof of stake? I'm conflicted on this one, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And the reason for that, obviously, is better for the environment. To go to proof of stake was quite wasteful, having all of your machines running nonstop. Just to generate these mathematical proofs. That said, when I look at the distribution of who actually controls these validators now, we've seen, there's 3 or 4 companies that control over 51% of the validator power, right? Coinbase, Binance, Lido. And so that is quite concerning for me, especially as we see the regulatory environment in the United States becoming increasingly hostile. And when you think about the power that the government has to go after these companies, and even, the executives of these companies, and say, hey, you either comply or we're going to throw you in jail, that becomes a major, major risk that we didn't have before. So I think this will be better once withdrawals are enabled. And then once withdrawals are enabled, then we hopefully will see a little bit better distribution among the validators. But I'd say we're in a pretty precarious spot right now where we have a massive consolidation of voting power among just a very few number of corporate entities that, we don't really know how easily they can be controlled by different regulatory parties. So I'd say I'm excited from environmental perspective and from like being less wasteful. I'm excited about the lower emissions as an ETH holder, but I do have some concerns about the decentralization of it and the centralization of power that we see today.
I just want to add to that. Do you think that proof of stake can be as secure as proof of work? I mean, these are the arguments that Bitcoin maxis always levy against proof of stake, is that proof of stake has a tendency to centralization, whereas proof of work, because it's the usage of energy or usage of encrypted energy, more secure. I'm quite torn about this. My honest opinion is I don't think most of the ESL arguments about Bitcoin are valid, because Bitcoin's energy consumption, majority of it is from renewable sources, or it's from places where it's difficult to get that energy onto the grid. So actually, it gives a way for us to invest in renewable energies, even though practically it's not feasible. But with Bitcoin, it becomes feasible because essentially you lock up those resources into Bitcoin. It's like you can lock up that time. Now it's not feasible, but maybe in 10 years' time it is feasible, and then you can put that energy source onto the grid. The point I'm trying to make is I'm still on the fence about the proof of work versus proof of stake argument, and I'm not sure whether or not if Ethereum becomes the base level of the base chain of the world, I think that security has to be of the utmost importance, and I wonder if moving to proof of stake undermines that.
Yeah, I think that's a concern, and I'm glad you brought up this point about energy consumption, because I think it's spot on. I think of it a little bit like a money battery, where electricity is the most expensive near cities because that's where people live and that's where demand is the highest. But a lot of the surplus energy is being produced in rural areas, miles away from anyone, and electricity doesn't travel very well. So, it doesn't work to send it for hundreds of miles to a nearby city. But if you're a Bitcoin miner, all you need is an internet connection and access to that power, and you can actually turn that into something that's creating real value for humanity. So I think you're absolutely right there. The narrative around blockchains being wasteful and using too much electricity is probably misfounded. As the miners are capitalists, they go where the electricity is the cheapest. And the cheapest electricity tends to be in rural areas where it's just would be going to waste otherwise. So I think you have a great point on that front. Ultimately, we don't know, right? If we, if we see proof of stake come under attack and these organizations, buckle under government pressure, then that's going to obviously we're going to end up regretting kind of this transition. But it could easily go the other way, where we see lots of other nodes pop up. People say, hey, this is worth fighting for. I'm going to become a validator. And we start seeing that decentralization spring up all around the world as people say, hey, this is something I really care about. And we'll stand up and defend what Ethereum is supposed to be. So I think the jury's still out. I really don't know. I think it's probably a little bit too early to call it one way or another.
I think that the two most compelling smart contract narratives that I've been listening to is A, on one side, the Ethereum narrative, and then B, on the other side, the Cosmos narrative. And I think that basically all layer ones are ultimately going to choose either being a layer 3 on Ethereum or being part of the interbanking communications network of Cosmos. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think we're going to be seeing many monolithic chains being out there, or do you think they will ultimately join Ethereum or Cosmos? And which one are you betting on? Because I think that the layer 3 narrative is very, very compelling because ZK rollups are probably going to change the whole industry.
Yep.
But at the same time, I do think that in the Cosmos world, there is a room for Bitcoin, right? Because you can make Bitcoin just without without wrapping it, you can make it into something integral to the Cosmos network. So that's also very compelling to me too.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, so a few things, running bridges is really, really hard. It's demonstrated by the fact that bridge after bridge has exploded to, 9-figure hacks. And so, having multiple chains that are bridging to each other is going to be a really tough proposition. It might be, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's a really hard problem. The ZK snarks, rollups, all that stuff is quite interesting, and they particularly work well for the use case where the same group of people are transacting frequently with each other. So you can think of something like an exchange is a perfect use case for this, where you have a group of users that are regularly transacting back and forth with each other. Perfect use case for something like ZK snarks. Doesn't work quite as well for occasional users, as the cost to sort of get on board and off board from that system can be quite high. I do think there is a place for multiple chains for different purposes. I think about Ethereum as the slowest but most secure computer in the world. And not every transaction that you make needs to be recorded on tens of thousands of computers for all eternity. It's just not necessary. My $5 purchase of a coffee just isn't that important. And so I do think it makes sense for there to be a little bit of fragmentation there between, if I'm playing a game and I'm, there's a small amount of value at stake, but not much. I might be willing to sacrifice some security in exchange for higher performance and convenience. But if I'm, talking about some, life savings, yes, it's really, really nice and reassuring to know that even a nation state that hates me can't take this money away from me. And so, I do see a world for multiple chains, multiple use cases. Maybe there's a demand for the glue that will tie these together. I think it's, again, quite early to say exactly how it's all going to come together.
I really like that point that you mentioned, that if you are talking about life savings, of course it's nice to have a secure network. But if we are just buying coffee or like some simple transactions, we don't really need to worry about security too much, because the risks are very, very low, even if something go wrong. This topic, proof of work versus proof of stake, is one of our most favorite, and we can talk about that for hours. But I would like to use this opportunity to ask you another question. You mentioned maybe a couple of minutes before about regulations and how regulations in different countries change. And if you're running a big crypto company and you have different projects, how do you talk to governments, or do you talk to people who write like new laws, or do you just follow their regulations? And how does it work with these big like political entities and decision makers? And how do you think we can strive for global adoption, and whether we need regulations or we don't need regulations? The topic is quite broad, but I would love to hear your opinion about that.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is we've spent an enormous amount of time speaking to lawyers over the last 5 years, more time than I would have ever imagined. Getting into esoteric parts of Howey law and these esoteric aspects of securities law. So it's been quite the learning experience. One of the challenges is that we, especially in the early days, 2017, 2018, we talked to 5 different law firms, and we'd hear 5 different perspectives on what the right way to do something was. And that's not normal, right? I've been an entrepreneur multiple times, and usually when I would ask a lawyer, "How do you do something?" They'd give me the same answer as every other lawyer in the country. It's very, very standardized as far as how you set up a company and how things are done. But in this space, it's so new, and there's lots of differing opinions, even among respectable firms and really smart people. And it's largely because we're trying to apply these laws that are 50, 100 years old to this brand new technology, and trying to apply it in ways that oftentimes don't really make sense. And so there's a bit of a tension between wanting there to be more clarity and knowing that we're going to be okay, but at the same time knowing that every time we do get involved, they tend to come in with these really heavy-handed measures that show they just don't understand the technology. The OFAC crackdown on Tornado Cash is like a great example of this, of coming in. Never before in history have we sanctioned a piece of code, and it has enormous implications on freedom of speech. Right? If you're saying a piece of code can be sanctioned, what does that mean for the people the developers who are writing that code, and isn't that just protected speech? So I think we do our best to stay on the right side of the law. We obviously invest heavily in getting counsel from people who follow this stuff and can help us, stay out of trouble with regulators. But it's an area where, it's quite concerning as the actions we've seen from regulators so far often show just a deep, misunderstanding of a technology. And it can be quite concerning.
Yeah, understandable. Thank you so much for your insights. Since we are off-chain podcast and we talk about so many things happening on-chain, I would like to ask you, what do you do in your free time?
Yeah, so I'll give you 3 things I do in my free time. So one is rock climbing. I love rock climbing, both indoors and outdoors. Yeah, both. I love it. I'm also an avid traveler. I've been to over 50 countries now, and obviously get to do a lot with work for is a great industry for people who enjoy traveling. But it's always great, visiting other countries, getting to know other cultures. And then I'm also learning Chinese. So
really,
trying to do that. It's a good challenge. It's really, really hard. But I'm enjoying the challenge.
Wow, I speak Chinese and Sean speaks Chinese. So you're yeah. How are you? Can you say like a couple of sentences for us?
你好，我名字是傅世乔。
非常高兴认识你。Okay, so let's do like this. In 1 year, we will have the same podcast, but in Chinese. Okay.
Amazing. Let's do it.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. That was OffChain podcast, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
The Insider's Insight podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial or investment advice. Nothing expressed in this podcast should be construed as a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer to buy or sell any financial products. Information expressed by the host or guest of this podcast does not necessarily reflect any views of our sponsors.